So I'm going to do a breakdown of the speech, and you might be a little surprised at my conclusions about the speech, because I thought it was half good, maybe even more than half good. What? Why? Well, I'm going to explain. And I'm going to explain, obviously, some of the absurdities and the lies in the speech as well. So that summary is coming up in a minute. And then I also am going to read some of your comments. I might even give away some money, fun for everybody, to all of our members. And you got to be a member, of course, to get the money. But and I want to thank all of our members that make this extra coverage possible. You guys are all wonderful. And speaking of which, by the way, Brittany just joined, and Bart McNeil just joined by hitting the join button below on YouTube. We appreciate it. And you could do likewise, and tyt.com/join for anyone not on YouTube. All right, so and I'll get to your comments in a minute. But first, let me do the summary. Okay, so Donald Trump just spoke and announced that he is running for president again. So it was unequivocal. So there was some question as to whether he was going to turn around before he gave the speech, because of how disastrous the midterms were. But he gave a very standard Donald Trump speech, and in a lot of ways, that's pretty good for him. So I'll explain why it's good as we go along here. So he unveiled a plan that I think he's calling the National Greatness Agenda. He kind of said it as an aside in the speech. He talked about some new ideas he has for election reform, a couple of which I like. There's a lot of twists and turns in this analysis, okay, and a bunch that, of course, I don't like. Of course, the speech was riddled with lies and fabrications and weird bragging that doesn't make any sense, and misstatements, etc. And I'll hit some of those as well. But why did I even think that the speech was halfway decent? Well, the reason is because he went back to his 2016 themes. Guys, I'm not analyzing it based on whether I liked it. Of course, every part of it. No, again, to be fair, not every part, but overwhelming majority of the speech, it was absurd, right? But I'm not judging it based on accuracy. I'm judging based on whether he's going to do well in the Republican primary. And he was on a prompter tonight, and so they know that when he goes off prompter, he has trouble, because he says some things that his audience loves, but he also makes mistakes. And he went off prompter a couple times and made mistakes. But whoever wrote the speech went back to classic Trump demagoguery, and in politics that works. In the Republican Party, it works even better. So this speech was designed for the Republican voters, and probably got the job done 80 to 90% of the way. I mean, this is just the very beginning. No one else has announced whether he can actually win an open question. I still have it at about 50-50. So if you're counting him out, don't. He hit all of his themes. So what are they? He talked about how he was going to keep everyone safe, and he kept talking about how I'm going to protect you. This is catnip for conservatives, because the number one thing that conservatives have is fear. They're super afraid of everything. So he went back to talking about immigrants. He went back to talking about how they're criminals and illegal aliens that are invading our country, and they're so bad, and he's so tough on them, and he was tough on Honduras and El Salvador and all these different places. For a lot of you, that might turn you off, but for Republican voters, they're like, yes, right? Finally, I'm so scared in this, and big bad Donnie's back to protect me and be vicious to my opponents, whether they're the libs that they want to own here in the US, or the others in other countries. He said, I am your voice. By the way, that is good politics to begin with, and for a lot of Republican voters, it's true. Whether you like that voice or not, he is their voice. By the way, why is he their voice? Because there's one thing he's really good at. He's a grade A con man. And in politics, that is a super useful skill set. That is as good an asset as you could have, because he's channeling the Republican voters. We've talked about this on Young Turks before. What he does is he A/B tests, he does trial and error. All the way back in 2013, 2014, he was going on conservative radio. I talk about it in my upcoming book, kind of upcoming, it's all the way in September. But anyway, if you want to pre-order, justicescomingbook.com. We'll have the link down below. Anyways, I show how in 2014 he would go on conservative talk and test, okay, do we like immigrants? And then boo, oh, we don't like immigrants, yeah. And he's like, okay, good, write it down, we don't like immigrants. So he is just mirroring back to Republican voters what they like. So He is formidable in a Republican primary. If you're underestimating him, you're making a total mistake. He talked about love. It's kind of weird, right? No, but that's his attachment to his voters. They like to hear that. He talked about America and how great America is. Remember, they don't actually mean America. America is the United States Constitution, our democracy, and all the things that Donald Trump doesn't care about, has never read, American ideals. He doesn't like equality. He said over and over in the speech, I don't want the trans in the military. I don't want them in sports. I don't want this. I don't want that. I don't want immigrants coming in here and being equal. No, he doesn't care about the idea of America, but the right wingers don't either. Republican voters think America as me. They say, I'm America, my family's America, my community's America. In a lot of ways, white people are America in their minds. So when he says, oh, America's great and we're gonna be wonderful again and we're gonna be prosperous and powerful, that's catnip. They love to hear it. He said, we're gonna save the country and get rid of the illegal alien criminals, okay? So these are, and then he talked about the globalists. These are the same exact themes that worked for him in 2016 in the primary and in the general election. So whoever wrote the speech did a good job of getting him back to those themes that has worked for him before. Now, the negative, horrible sides of the speech that unfortunately also work for right wingers. He talked about, quote, blood-soaked streets. He said, quote, there's cesspools of blood. He called immigrants savages, right? And he says, well, later they will say that he said it just about MS-13. No, he blended MS-13 in with undocumented immigrants, which he calls illegal aliens, with immigrants. And so who was he calling savages? It doesn't matter, the right wing thinks they're all savages. They love to hear it. If you hate to hear it, that means the right wingers probably love to hear it. But he did screw up a couple of times. Whenever he went off prompter, not in the facts, he makes up the facts all the time. For example, in the prompter it said 2 to 3 million illegal immigrants are coming in now a year. And he's like 2 to 3 million. He said it out loud. He reads it in the prompter. He's like 2 to 3 million. No, I think it's 10 million. Because he's just making up numbers, right? And he doesn't like that they wrote a low number. He wants the number to be higher. Well, truth is optional. But that's not what I'm referring to when I say he screwed up when he went off prompter. When he went off prompter, he said, I'm a victim. Okay. In the speech, there was almost no talk of the stolen election, but he ad-libbed it in a couple of places. There was a couple of lines in the speech that appeared to be written about 2020, but only a couple and only a grazing reference. Now, if you let Trump go off prompter, the entire speech would have been about 2020. That's why they put him on prompter. They're like, it's not working. That's not your best material. That's why we lost the midterms. All your guys lost the midterms. So let's go back to the golden oldies here. But the minute he goes off prompter, he's like, another thing he said is, we've been persecuted. I've been persecuted. So he's not gonna be able to help himself when he's on the campaign trail. He's gonna keep on talking about, oh, I'm the victim. At one point, he hilariously said, in this country when it was great, we didn't have whining. Dude, you're patient zero in whining. Okay, all you ever do is whine. And he said, I remember these great elections. We used to have them, you have it on one day and then it's over and no one complains. You're the one complaining, okay? No one contested the elections before. You're the one who's contesting the election. He's unbelievable, right? So and then of course the absurdities rolled in. Caravans, I came up with that name. There's been caravans since the Silk Road. You did not come up with that name, you did not come up with that word. Before he said that he came up with the word fake, that it didn't exist in the English language. Okay, guy's an actual verifiable lunatic. I mean, every once in a while he'll make fun of Biden as he did in this speech about like, oh, he thought he was in Florida when he was in Idaho. That's why I'm so glad I beat him in 2020. Well, I mean, wait, what? Like he screws up the dates, he screws up the places all the time. And then it was a weird constant references to nuclear weapons. So I have a little bit of a controversial theory here. It's definitely speculation. So one thing that he's doing for sure, before I get to the speculation, is he's setting up a win-win for himself and a lose-lose for Biden. He's like, oh, can you believe they hit Poland? They would have never done Ukraine if I was in charge. And but I didn't start any wars. And nuclear is the worst thing. At one point he hilariously said, That's why I never say the word nuclear. You just said it right there in that same sentence. But people like that too. They think even if he sounds, if it's funny because he's an idiot, still the right wing's like, it's so funny, man. He never says the word, but he said it right there. I love Trump, right? So, but why is he talking about that so often? Because number one, if Russia launches a nuke, he's gonna come out and go, see, I told you. It was Biden's fault. Remember all the times that I talked about how terrible nuclear was, and under Biden we got nuked. And by the way, the Russians, they've helped him before. I mean, that would be a nuclear case of helping him. So, I mean, can Biden win if a nuke goes off? So I don't know, but he did mention it a curious number of times. So that's halfway speculation there, certainly, or plenty speculation. So the part that's not speculation is if Biden doesn't somehow win the war, or if the war gets larger, he's gonna take credit either way. There's no question about that. But the nukes in particular, one might be because if the Russians launch, he wants to take credit. The speculation part is, remember, he had documents about our nuclear secrets. We know that. He took them to Mar-a-Lago. Did he sell our nuclear secrets? Does he know something we don't know about the likelihood of a nuke going off? So, okay, that one is, like I said, speculation based on some things that we know, but it was curious. All right, now back to the absurdities. This is just a fun one. He kept saying, there's a serious element to it too. Our quarters of power. There are corridors of power. Except he kept saying, our quarters of power are Carters. And I was like, what, Jimmy Carter, Rosalind Carter? Which quarters of power do you have? Anyways, but the reference there is, remember on January 6th when everybody was in the corridors of Congress, he's saying to them, no, that's our house. That's our quarters of power and we're gonna take it back. They love that kind of talk. He said, I will fight for you like no one has ever done before. They love that kind of talk. He referred to the Biden administration seemingly as the pause between his two terms. He kept saying, and this drives me crazy, all the Republicans say this, there's an open border. I guarantee you if you polled Republicans, like at least 80% of them would think that the border is literally open, meaning we have no laws that prevent people coming in illegally. That's not remotely true. We have laws around asylum. We have laws around if you're an undocumented immigrant, if we catch you and you don't have an asylum claim, we do not let you in the country. But I bet you it totally works and the Republicans probably think, the Republican voters think, there's no laws at all. There was under Trump and there isn't under Biden. No, Biden actually kept almost all of Trump's policies about the border. The judges had to overturn them. And the amount of undocumented immigrants that came in under Trump were very similar to the ones that came in under Biden. But he makes it seem like nobody came in under him and everybody's pouring in, tens of millions are pouring in under Biden. He kept referring to how he built the wall. There's no wall. He never built the wall. But it doesn't matter. His audience doesn't want the truth. They want lies. So in their imagination, he already built a spectacular wall that covers the entire border. But 3 weeks in, Joe Biden came in and started taking it down. That's why you can't see it now. Biden took it down. No, Biden said stop building this irrelevant part of a tiny little wall that you built that couldn't possibly cover the whole border. It was minuscule, and continuing to make it minuscule times 2 wouldn't have made any difference at all. He didn't build it. The only thing that he accomplished was tax cuts for the rich. And so he talked about a storm and a fire that they will not be able to understand. And in that case, he seemed to be referring to his Republican primary opponents. So it's a big warning to DeSantis and anybody else thinking of coming in. Don't get me wrong, I haven't changed at all, he's saying. I'm still the same OG. And I'm gonna just blast you guys. And that I'm not at all surprised by that. He hilariously talked about unity. We're gonna unify this country. Now why? He's the guy who's ripped the country apart so many times. Because the message of unity worked for Biden in 2020, so they just wanna co-opt it. They wanna say, oh yeah? We're the one who's unifying the country. They're the ones that are splitting it up. Remember, Republican primary voters are the only ones that matter in this portion of the battle. He's just trying to win this battle. And if you tell Republican primary voters that Trump unified and Biden split us up, they believe that in a second. They believe that right away, okay? So, and then there was a vicious part of the speech where he talked about the drug dealers. There's a great irony there. First of all, the drug dealers are terrible. Of course, we all agree to that. He makes it seem like, oh no, the Democrats are pro-drug dealers. Not true, okay? But he said that he wants to bring executions back. You think that sounds brutal? But I bet you tons of Republican primary voters, the great majority of them will love that idea. He wants to execute people within 1 day. He's like, I want to do it like China, bring the guy in, have a trial, basically a show trial, and then execute him by the end of the day. He said that in the speech. Of course, progressives will not be able to help themselves. The left Democrats will not be able to help themselves and say, don't do that. And then that will help them in a Republican primary where they'll be like, execute, execute. They'll love that blood sport, right? He said he could reduce crime by 75 to 80% as soon as he gets in. What a preposterous made up number. Again, every voter in the primary will believe it. The one part that he was right about is, he's like, I don't want any blue ribbon committees. Well, here, brother, on that one. Like all Biden Democrats ever do, set up blue ribbon committees. That's an excuse for not doing anything, although I don't want to do what he's doing. So the irony in the crime thing is, he said, oh, the fentanyl is the worst. That's true. And China is bringing it in. It's partly true. China is producing some of the chemicals that they use in fentanyl, okay? But why did fentanyl explode? It's because of Trump's policy to close the border. When he made it harder to close cross the border, they then had to sneak it in quantities that were manageable. And the only way to do that was to shrink it by putting it in the form of fentanyl, which was easier to transport, easier to hide, easier to bring in. Because of Trump doing what he did at the border, even though it didn't work very much in stopping immigrants, it did unfortunately create the epidemic of fentanyl. Not completely by itself, it's not like fentanyl didn't exist before, but it greatly magnified it. So there's a great irony, but could Democrats or DeSantis explain what I just explained to you about fentanyl? There's no chance. So every Republican voter is going to think that China created it, Trump is going to stop it, just by being tough. He kept it simple. The old adage, keep it simple, stupid, where we're going to be great, they're terrible, they're blood-soaked streets, we're going to save the country. He referred to himself as a politician and said, oh, I hate that thought. And that's good. All voters hate the idea of politicians, but especially Republicans. He said that he was going to fight against the Washington establishment. They're going to love that kind of talk, going back to the theme of drain the swamp that people liked. And now finally, he suggested a number of things to clean up elections. And a couple of them were actually good. So one is the Stock Act. He didn't call it that, but that bans members of Congress from trading based on their insider information. Nancy Pelosi was against that because the #1 trader based on that information is her husband, Paul Pelosi. So her family gets rich off of that. She had to bend to pressure later, but she didn't mean it. She doesn't want to pass that bill. A lot of corporate Democrats don't want to pass that bill. Corporate Republicans definitely don't want to pass that bill. Does Trump want to pass it? I don't know, but is it a good campaign strategy to say that you want to pass it? Definitely. Okay, I actually do want to pass it. He said a lifetime ban on lobbying for politicians. If you're a politician, you can't come back and lobby. I love that. I would definitely support that. Does he mean it? He almost never means it. When he was in charge for 4 years, he didn't ban the lobbyists, he enriched the lobbyists. He made the lobbyists a lot more abundant and fruitful. The lobbyists loved Donald Trump. He didn't drain the swamp at all. But if he were to actually institute that ban, I would definitely be in favor of it. We're honest and fair on this show. If he's accidentally or on purpose does something good, I'm happy to give him credit for it. But then he had a couple of things. He said, and constitutional amendment on term limits. I could go either way on that, but it's not an offensive idea at all. It's a perfectly reasonable idea. But the two things that he mentioned make no sense at all about election reform. One, he said, only paper ballots and you have to have only same-day voting. Why? You know what another word for mail-in voting is? Voting. What's wrong? He does mail-in voting. Okay, he brags about how he does mail-in voting. He's such a weird guy. But they know, and Trump has literally said this out loud before, that if you allow more voting overall, Republicans will never win in national office again. He said it earlier. Okay, not in this speech, but he said that out loud because he can't contain himself. So they're trying to greatly restrict the number of people voting so they can get back to Republican victories. In a democracy, they stand almost no chance. And finally, he had this bizarre one. It sounded like he was saying that he's gonna ban public financing of elections. But that would make the country more corrupt because then we have to go to private financing of elections. By the way, you know what's private financing of elections if you're a Republican? George Soros. George Soros is private financing of elections. Do you want that? Woke corporations giving money to politicians is private financing of elections. Public financing means that they might work for the public. Private financing guarantees that politicians work for private interests. So that would make corruption 10 times worse than it is today. So as you can see, there was upsides and downsides to the speech, okay? But we are not the target demographic for that speech, the target audience for that speech. Republican primary voters are. And overall, I thought he did a pretty effective job of reaching them. I don't know what mainstream media and right-wing media are gonna say because they both have narratives that they drive. They all have agendas that they drive. The mainstream media hates Donald Trump, right-wing media is conflicted, right? But an actual assessment of whether that speech worked for his intended purpose was, I would say, 8 out of 10. It largely did work. And again, if you're confused by that, it's because Republican voters don't mind viciousness and they don't mind lies. In fact, they greatly prefer it, and that's what Donald Trump gave them to. And so there's only 4 ways this ends, guys. Either he loses in humiliating fashion in a Republican primary, awesome. He loses in a humiliating fashion in a general election, awesome. He drops out at some point, that's still possible, even though he announced tonight, if things go disastrously and it looks like he's gonna come in 3rd or 4th or get embarrassed in Iowa or New Hampshire, he might just take his ball and go home right before the voting starts. Entirely possible. Or the 4th option is he wins, and that's still on the board. The question is, can Ron DeSantis or anyone else come in and be strong enough to challenge him and punch him in the face politically and punch him and punch him and punch him again and show that they are stronger than Trump? I'm not at all sure of that. Are you really sure of that? Everybody in media that has an agenda says they're sure of it. But have you ever seen Ron DeSantis do that? I've never seen him do it. To a fellow Republican, to Trump? When you see DeSantis' hand motions and he's just copying Trump and doing this, a guy who's trying to copy Trump is less likely to beat Trump. I'm not saying that DeSantis can't win. He has monumental advantages. At the end of the speech, I still have it at 50-50 on whether he wins the Republican nomination.